Dearly beloved, we gather here to celebrate Halloween with a special two-part episode of Blue Collar White Coat. I'm your host, Amy Weldon, and today you're meeting someone with a STEM job that everyone will have to interact with eventually. That sounded dark, but it's true. My friend Michelle Tokarski is a mortician in the making. She is a certified funeral counselor in the state of California and an embalming apprentice rapidly closing in on her final requirements for professional status. Her journey from art school dropout to death care professional is not only fascinating, but surprisingly full of heart, empathy, and even a little humor. You could say she puts the fun in funeral? On a serious note, in reviewing our conversation, I realized there were just too many important messages here about death and life to squeeze into one episode. So that's why there are two. While we don't get too far into the literally gory details in this episode, I do want to caution listeners that this material is hard to listen to sometimes, not just because of the gross out factor, but because death is something that none of us really enjoy thinking about. So if that's you, you won't hurt my feelings if you need to skip these episodes. You can also use the chapters feature to skip ahead to sections that are more about Michelle's life, her career path, and some of the softer sides of death care. Anyway, before we bury ourselves 6 feet under on the topics of funeral services, death care, embalming procedures, and how the dead are always easier customers than the living, take a second to make sure you're following Blue Collar White Coat wherever you're listening right now. Do it! Come on! Subscribe if you have the option, and leave a review about why you like the show. It really helps new listeners find us. It's easy to remember if you just think of RIP. Reviews improve podcasts. Get it? Wow. This room is really dead. Okay, I'm starting this special episode of Blue Collar White Coat now. See you on the other side. Well, thanks so much for joining us again on Blue Collar White Coat. And today I have a very special guest, someone who is actually newer in my life, but already one of my top favorite humans. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Michelle Tokarski. I live in the state of California, and I am a funeral counselor and technically, according to the state, an apprentice embalmer.
So Michelle and I met thanks to our dogs, and we actually live around the corner from each other, which is super fun. And I found out, I think probably one of the second or third times I talked to you, that you were a mortician. And then this podcast was not on my radar yet, and down the line I talked about, I'm going to do this podcast and different jobs in STEM and whatever. And it's so crazy to me how many jobs are STEM related without people thinking they are. So I'm just super excited for this episode.
I'm excited because I also enjoy talking about this topic.
All right. So let's talk about how you got here. Like, you are a huge horror fan. You are a self-proclaimed, recovering goth kid. And, still goth kid, because you can do that your whole life too, listeners. It's not a phase. And so how did you get here? What did you do before? Yeah. What is the journey like?
So I'm one of those people that's done just a little bit of everything. I never could give you a job when I was a kid. What do you want to be when you grow up? I think, like, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a vet. I did all the standard children thing. I'm going to want to be a veterinarian. Then I really quickly learned what that looked like and was like, absolutely not. You know what I mean? And so I come from the East Coast originally, and I've moved a ton because I grew up with a family that worked in the casino industry. So in about 9 years old, we moved to the Midwest to help open the casinos there. And we were in that area through my middle school, high school, and early 20s. And high school was exactly what high school is for most people. It was miserable.
Agreed.
There was fun about it. I was your standard wear all black and listen to dark music and and stuff like that. And I still just kind of knew, like, I don't know, I think one day I'll be an artist or I'll do something. And I never really had a pinpoint on it. So I didn't go straight to school. I went out into the workforce right away. I am well versed in customer service jobs. And I did that for a while. And then the recession hit, 2007 recession, 2008. And everyone went, I guess you should go to school or something. You need to have a degree to get out of this. So I was like, okay. So I went to school for graphic design,
Hmm.
and because I love art. And I ended up going to a school program that later would be found as fraudulent, clearing my federal loans, which is really nice.
I was gonna say graphic design is a booming market now because of the internet, because of social media, especially because internal communications at huge corporations and organizations is such a big deal. Like having graphic design degree, like you're pretty much set now. Whereas when you and I were growing up, like I was also from an artistic family, and my like uncle and aunt and anybody else who had tried to make art a living were like, do not do graphic
Yes.
design.
So, we kind of live in this society that we go to high school, we have our American high school dream, and then we get in our 4-year program and we move forward and we get into a ton of debt and we don't necessarily do what we want to do. Well, the biggest thing I like to impart to a lot of people is you don't have to do that. You know what I mean? Now, not going to school right away is still going to be hard. It's going to be real hard. You're going to do a lot of bottom of the
Yeah.
barrel dirt
Yep.
jobs.
Yep.
But I also think there's a lot of value in that because it definitely humbles you to tell you how you should treat others. But I didn't have anyone that really went to college. I didn't have that. There was no
Modeling for
pipeline in
you.
my family. And I think for me, and I think a lot of other elder millennials might feel this way too, that wasn't necessarily what we wanted. I never in a million
Oh.
years thought I would be married. It took a very special person for me to be willing to do that.
Shout out
And
George, he's the
well,
best.
he's a huge part of this story too.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't that. It was, growing up, it was a lot of like, oh, you'll be fine. You can get a good job even without a degree. And then, we went into the early 2000s and turned out that didn't work out that way.
Mm-mm.
During that time, I had just moved to Las Vegas because I knew I couldn't be in the Midwest anymore. Just,
The opposite of the Midwest in terms of like
oh, yeah.
culture.
And so I moved to Las Vegas, the recession happens, and I go to school. Now, the thing about that is there's a ton of graphic design jobs in Las Vegas because
Yeah,
billboards change constantly,
sure.
shows change constantly, slot machines, tabletops, right? Everything. The little snapper cards for the cat houses, right?
I
All
was
that
just
stuff is
gonna
graphic
say
design work.
the flyers for the
Uh,
strip joints, man.
I
Heck
know.
yeah.
And so there was a lot of work. It just wasn't necessarily what I found fulfilling. I was really lucky when I had to do my internship. I interned at R&R Partners, which is an advertising firm out of Las Vegas who is known for doing what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's
Mm,
them. And like had like very large clients and stuff like that. And so it was really cool. But that internship is what told me I didn't want to be a graphic designer.
sure. Yay.
And,
And that's what
I
internships
think
are for sometimes too. Figuring out what you, it's like
exactly,
dating. It's like, oh, you know what? This is not for me.
exactly. And I think it was just, I just realized, oh, I'm not a graphic designer. I'm an artist. And
Yeah.
there's a big
Yeah.
line between that, right? Making art that
Absolutely.
somebody else is telling you every step versus you making art that you believe in. And so that was kind of a thing where I went, I'm good. And then I started kind of getting weird vibes from the school and I was like, I'm done. So I actually left my senior year. I was like, nope.
Mm,
And again, this goes back to the not having a model, not having somebody like when I sat and went to those meetings with the counselor to get you in, no one was there with me
mm-mm,
because I lived on my
mm.
own and I just didn't know how. And so anyway, the school was starting to feel really weird and I was like, I'm out. And at the same time, I had gotten a job at Apple Retail, which, Apple computers, and never in a million years thought I could do that work. They just were like, "You have a really great smile, so we'll teach you all about
Oh.
computers." And I was like, "Okay." So, went there, loved it, absolutely had a great time there, and that's how I ended up meeting my husband
Yeah.
because he worked for Apple as well. Which is then, we worked our way up, and then it was time for him to transition to corporate life,
Hmm.
and because he is amazing at what he does, and so it was like, okay, I guess we're leaving Las Vegas and we're moving to California. So we moved to California and I'm still doing retail. And there did just hit a point where it was either I was going to head toward corporate or I was going to accept staying in retail. And I went, I don't really like either of those options.
Yeah.
So I am very, very lucky, very, very privileged that I have a husband who, cares. He cares a lot. And he
Mhm.
looked at me and said, "Hey, we're really fortunate. It's just the two of us. Why don't you just leave and take some time to figure out what it is you want to do?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we'd had a lot of conversations. He was raised in like, oh, there was never a question about him going to college, right? Like he was raised in that world where it was like, oh no, you don't have chores at home. Your job is to come home and study and become the smartest person because you need to do better than the generation before
And
you.
he's second generation immigrant, right? Like his
No,
parents are immigrants?
he's an immigrant. He
Oh,
immigrated when he was a child.
wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's
his
that's
whole
a
family.
reoccurring theme, I feel, with folks that have to
Yes,
start all over in a new place.
exactly. And which I
Mhm.
also think is something that really bonded us, even though we have
Mm,
completely different backgrounds, right? He had
yeah.
to start completely over when he was 5, and I spent years bouncing around, so I kept having to restart, restart, restart. And luckily, as a kid who was raised by television and movies in the 80s and 90s, I was sold the idea that we're a united and everything that makes us different is great. And so I think that was a lot of what really brought us together. So he, like I said, he was wonderful enough to say like, "Hey, I was given this opportunity to really take the time to decide what I want to do, to foster that." And he was like, "And you weren't." And it's just,
Mhm.
it's not anyone's fault. It's just
Nope.
the way the chips fell.
Yep. But you're
And
not in
so he
survival
was,
mode anymore, so let's take advantage of that
and that
and
was the thing. So I was like, okay. So I left and did a bunch of different small jobs, right? Did commercial modeling. Never thought I'd do that. Um, I did like booth work, like those people you see at Costco's and all different things, like just standing there selling
oh, yep.
products and talking to
Yep.
people. Um, and then I went into nonprofit, and that's where I really love it, right? And it was starting as a volunteer and then working at the bottom level. And so I started that here by working at Children's Fairyland of Oakland as
That's
an animal
right.
caregiver.
Yeah, and that's like a small regional theme park. So just for listeners, like before there was Disneyland, before there was Disney World, before
Mhm.
there was Harry Potter World, whatever,
Yeah.
before people could jump on a plane and be somewhere in 2 hours, there were like neighborhood amusement parks. There were like small regional amusement parks, and that could be a whole podcast just by itself. But yeah, so Fairyland is one of these, right?
Yes. Fairyland is amazing, and they've been around since, I believe, 1950. They were open before Disneyland. So it's an amusement park, but it's all about children's imagination, fostering imagination. And so this is a place in the heart of Oakland where families can go that don't have a lot of money,
That don't
and they
have
provide
Disney
small
money.
science
Yeah.
education, right? Nothing huge, but we partner with a lot of the Oakland schools to do like summer
Yeah.
science programs. I got to spend a couple years, sealing animal scat in acrylic
Well,
because
hell
kids love
yeah.
looking at
Yep.
that, right?
As one
Doing
does, as one
casts, yeah,
does.
doing casts of paws and hooves, collecting scales from bearded dragons and feathers and everything so kids could learn. And it was great. I loved it. It was
Yes.
like one of the most fun jobs ever. But you can't really live in the Bay Area
Nope.
and work in nonprofit.
Kitcher.
I was like, I can't keep doing this.
Right.
I have to be able to provide. So from there, I actually went to a different nonprofit that I will sing the praise of, and that's Open Heart Kitchen. And what they do is they provide free meals for seniors. They also provide free meals for kids for after school and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
no questions asked. And when I started as a volunteer, what you do is you just put on an apron and you go serve food. I loved doing it. And so they came to me and they said, "Do you think you could work for us?" And I was like, "Sure, sounds great. Why not?" I take over the program March 1st, 2020.
Oh, no.
About 2 weeks later, as we're gearing up for our big St. Patrick's meal for all the seniors, we get this message that says, "Hey, I don't think we can have anyone come in." And we're like, "Okay, like we'll
Certainly
figure
not
it
big
out."
groups of older folks. Oh, no.
So for about a year, we were the only people they interacted with and had the most fun I've ever had. I will tell you this, lockdown was a very frightening but very different experience for me, I think, than a lot of people. I was out of the house every day.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so when I started looking at my neighbors and talking to them and realizing like, "Oh, you don't eat meat for
Yeah.
religious reasons." So I spent the other part of my lockdown and a lot of teaming trying to figure it out. And it was beautiful because we worked together to create a vegetarian menu. We
Yeah.
worked together to make sure we had halal butchers
Mm.
because we came up and said, like, listen, like, we have to take care of everyone. That's the whole point, and nothing should stand in the way of that. So simultaneously, as all this is happening, at the end of 2019, I was out on a nice evening stroll with my husband and my dog, and I told him, I said, school didn't work out last time. It was really kind of a bummer, but I kind of think I want to go back to school. I just want to do something. I know I want to do something, and I'm just not sure what it is. And my husband looks at me and goes, "You should be a funeral director." And I thought he was making fun of me because, as you said, I wear a lot of black. I love horror movies. I live for Halloween. And so I started laughing. I was like, "Ha, yeah, very funny." And he was like, "No." He's like, he goes, "I think you have a skill set that might work in this." He's like, "You love diversity. You love cultural anthropology." And he goes, "And you're not scared of the idea of death. Like you're very," and I was that kid. I was the kid at
Yeah.
like 11 years old who was like, "Well, we're all going to die one day." You know what I mean? Like I
Yes,
was the
yes.
Lydia Dietz. I
Yeah,
was
Lydia
that.
Dietz. I was just gonna say that. I too am strange and
I am
unusual.
so alone. Yeah. And so I was like, oh. And so when I realized he wasn't making fun of me, I went, okay, well, how do you become a funeral director? Right.
That's not a brochure in high school that you can, yeah, in the guidance counselor.
Nobody ever came to me and told me how to do it. Right. Because we're really scared of death as a whole. We're obsessed with it, like we talked about, in
Right.
our pop culture, in our games and everything. But the second it's in our face and it's in front of us, everybody's terrified. So I started looking. I went to ye old Google. How does one become a funeral director in California? So, in the state of California, to be eligible to apply for licensure as a funeral director, and this is per the Cemetery and Funeral Bureau, who is our governing board, you must be 18 or older. You must possess an associate's in arts or an associate's in science degree or equivalent. And you must have committed no felonies and stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then what you do to apply is you have a completed application form. You then have to have your official transcripts, and then you also have to sit for an exam. And so like I said, I had never finished that graphic design, so I didn't have anything. So I started looking, going, well, how do you go to school to be a mortician? And in California at the time, there was only two schools. There's one in Cypress, and then there's one in Sacramento. So, the Sacramento one is a community college called American River College. And so I was like, community college was reasonable. I could pay for it out of pocket. And the other takeaway I want anyone who hears what I say today is do not let our culture lie to you about community college.
We always called it the 13th grade. Grew up, that's kind of what they were. But I feel like our generation has been like, hey, we can't afford 4-year school, nor do we really want it. So let's make community college into an actual resource for people.
And
What a
yes,
concept.
and in our generation, it was seen as you're not good enough. If you're listening to this and you don't know what you want to do with your future, go to community college. So we went to the school, we toured, we met the counselor. So we
Mhm.
were preparing for like summer school to get in, right? Great, no problem. And then, as we all remember,
Mhm.
March 2020 hits, and I'm already registered for classes.
Mhm.
And then the world shut down, and we went, oh. And
Cool.
so luckily, American River College went, okay, let's figure out how we can do this.
Mhm.
And so it was a lot of sitting on Zoom and learning about this industry via online, with one exception. You can't embalm on a computer.
Nope.
So uh, we were given clearance to leave lockdown in order to do our labs. A really great thing about this school is they put you in labs instantly. You make it into a
Yeah. Oh,
funeral
cool.
program within the first month. You're going to go to a lab, and you're going to and the way an embalming lab worked when I was there, um, usually about 4 to 5 students, most likely 4, one instructor, and you are working on some of the hardest cases you'll ever work on.
Mm.
Because, right, most people, if they lose a loved one, aren't going, hey, let's go to that community college and see what they can do to make my loved one look great. Totally
Mm.
fair. So the way
Yeah.
the school actually has the ability to practice is they have a contract with the County of Sacramento and indigent cases, so people who have no family, people who have and the county has to do a certain amount of reaching out and searching. Like they can't just say like, "Well, it's been a week,
Mhm.
send them
Yeah.
to the school." No, obviously there's, they care quite a bit to find and make sure. So sometimes their 3 or more months have passed. A human body is just a is just an organic,
Blob of
thing.
water and
Yeah, we
yeah,
are.
yeah.
Yes, so a lot of the bodies you're learning to work on are some of the most extreme cases you'll ever do. So I will
Mm.
tell you, you get in real fast and you decide real fast if this is
Yeah,
work you
it's
can
kind
do.
of it's like a gauntlet.
Yeah,
You have to decide if you
I
really want it or not.
remember I remember the eve before I went to my first embalming lab, I remember looking at my husband and saying, "What if I can't do it? What if I get there and I just can't do it?" And he
Yeah.
went, "Well, you tried. If you
Yeah.
can't do it, you tried,
Yeah.
and we do something else. So let's hear it for supportive men in this
Mm.
world."
Yay, I know. Shout out again. It's true.
Um, so I went and it was life-changing. I went, "Oh, I can do this work,
I was
and I
gonna say,
love this work."
did your like science brain like click into gear? Like it went from like, oh, trepidation and like this is a person, and then all of a sudden like, ooh, what is that? Like I need to learn about this.
Yeah. So the science brain really kicks in once you get later into the program because then you do have to take quite a bit of science classes because,
Mm-hmm.
right, anatomy, you have to take pathology, you have to take a lot of different stuff just to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, you are mixing formaldehyde as part
Yeah.
of your job. So you're learning
The
basic
chemical
chemistry to make
part.
sure you don't
Yeah.
gas yourself and you don't do things like that. Yeah.
Wow.
And so we but we went in and it was amazing, right?
Mm.
It was looking at this and going like, I can take something that is in a terrible state and I can do everything in my ability to attempt to make it as beautiful as I can. And that's a lot. And so it is the thing that I found I really loved about it was because I was intimidated about the science. I wasn't a
Mm.
scientist, I'm an artist.
Yeah, sure.
But what I ended up loving is embalming is a complete 50-50 marriage of
Mm.
science and art.
Absolutely.
You're going to need to understand chemicals. You need to understand anatomy. You need to understand things, like I said, pathology, microbiology. These are all classes you take for a reason. It does not matter if you have that skill set. If you do not understand color theory, if you do not
Mm-hmm.
understand proportions,
Mm-hmm.
you have to understand how to rebuild a face, which is where do you learn that?
Mm.
Drawing. You learn that in
Mm-hmm.
sculpting. You learn that in a lot of classes. So the curriculum for funeral service is a mixture of science, art, and then anthropology because you also have to learn religion. You also have to
Right.
learn all different things. Not that you're going to learn them perfectly in school, like that's going to be your starting point, but you have to learn how to come correct, right? And not
Right.
just
The
show up in an
basics of
offensive
like,
manner.
right. This
Yes.
Catholic person is not gonna have the same as this Hindu person or
Well, and if we're not all of us have the benefit of being raised where you can just study anything you want at any time, right? A lot of us are locked into family tradition.
Mhm.
So quite often, if you've been raised, as a white Christian or a white Catholic, some of the other, rituals that are done might be very confusing or even frightening to you for other religions. So it's also just learning those so that you know what you're walking into because you never want to come in and be like, "What are you
Ugh,
doing?" No, you
I'm not
don't
doing
know.
that.
Like
Yeah, sure.
that's not your job at all. Your job is to come in and care about these people, right?
Um,
And so we got in and I loved it. I loved it. I was like, okay, this is really, it's hard work. Embalming is hard. You are
yeah.
lifting a
You
human
gotta be
body. You are doing,
strong. Yeah.
yes, you are doing a lot of heavy lifting. You are bending. You know what I'm saying? You have to protect your back. You're wearing a full PPE usually.
Mhm, mhm.
Or at least I'm in a respirator. At the very least, I'm in a respirator,
I didn't even
gloves, and
think
a
about that. Is that what your
full.
shirt is? Do you have
Oh
a
yeah.
like
So this is
yeah.
actually we made this. This is for my graduation. We've got our urn, our
Mhm.
coffin. and 2 aneurysm hooks, which is our main thing we
Oh,
use in embalming. Yeah, they're the worst name stuff.
oh,
Some of the names are terrible, but your aneurysm hooks are your main thing because that's what you're using to search, to move, to pick things like that in forceps, right? So you're not putting like hands. And so shout out to
cool.
Ursula Gomez for
Yeah,
making these awesome shirts
so cool.
to memorialize our time together. So did the embalming, that was great. And then so you do that a couple times. Eventually, when you're in the school, you do have to get an internship by the end of your senior year. And in that includes 10 embalmings that are being supervised by people at the funeral home you're at, with a sign off at the end by your instructor, or like by the school instructor. And then you also have to do a certain amount of other things like removals, right? Going and bringing somebody into your care, meeting with families,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
even if you don't meet with families, you can do a mock arrangement, right? Because obviously, as a student, your funeral home might not want to put you in a room with somebody who's
right.
in grief. So
Yeah.
those you're allowed to sit like with the director. Maybe you're just in the room with them, or the director can come up with a scenario and act out a mock one just to try and get you to understand how to talk to people, right? Because we are here to help, but it is still a job. So
Mm.
you don't want to come in selling because I don't like that. That
No,
makes me
no,
feel gross.
gross.
But there is a cost associated. So how do you properly
Mm.
talk to somebody about this?
One of the questions that popped up in my head, like before when I was writing these questions, I guess, everybody's seen CSI. Everybody's seen like
Mhm.
all of these,
Yeah.
true crime is such a thing right now. And so, like, what's the difference between, I'm glad you just called out sales, but what's the difference between a mortician and a like medical examiner?
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually a great question. So the biggest difference is a medical examiner works for the government
Hmm.
and a mortician does not. We're independent. So a mortician, or otherwise a funeral director, an embalmer, two different, right? Because you can be a funeral director, you can be an embalmer, or you can be dual licensed. As I mentioned earlier, I'm considered a funeral counselor because I have to finish my exam. I just have to sit for my exam. And right now I'm waiting to finish my embalmings and my apprenticeship. And then I'm just going to do it all at once because I've already taken that exam and passed. So a medical examiner or coroner, their job is research and study and solve a case, right? With the medical examiner, and I'm only speaking for California, specifically in the Bay Area is what I'm speaking about right now, because obviously things can be different. Um, the medical examiner has one of the highest levels of authority to take somebody into under their care. So if if somebody has passed away and they haven't seen a doctor in more than 20 days, that goes to the coroner. Coroner isn't necessarily going to take them in and do a full autopsy, but they have to at least review everything, medical records. They have to review all of that because they just have to make sure that nothing nefarious has happened. That's their job.
Right. Yeah.
Um, if during COVID, if somebody passed with COVID, even to right now, we actually have to refer it to the coroner so that they understand. They're keeping track of communicable disease. That's something that you refer to the coroner. Um, if they've been traveling, if they don't live in California, they're visiting. That happens so much more than people realize.
Mhm.
We're a state that people travel to quite a bit. Fortunately, we deal with a lot of people, oh, yes, and internationally traveling in. And so, of course, their doctors aren't here. So the medical examiner will have to hold on until they can contact doctors and get records from other countries, right? Mm. And then, of course, obviously, if there's suspicion of homicide or,
Foul play.
suicide, anything like that, that the medical examiner then takes it from there. So the medical examiner would take you into their custody, and once they're finished with either an external or full autopsy, external meaning they're just going to look, maybe take some toxicology. A full autopsy is what we think of when we think of the movies, when we
Mm.
think of that Y incision we always see. That is specifically for an autopsy. When they do things like organ and tissue donation, it is a different style of opening a person, right?
Mm.
Because of what you're trying to do.
Sure.
So once all that testing is done and they've proven who the next of kin is and who has the right to disposition, that is a huge thing. Health and Safety Code 7100 is the number one set of laws that we in the state of California have to follow as funeral directors and counselors and funeral death care workers. In most states are very similar. So if you set up a pre-need contract, you get to decide whatever you want as long as it's in accordance to the state of California. That's it. That is your wishes. And I will 10 out of 10 recommend people
There should be a
always
whole
go ahead and
podcast
set
on
everything
how
up.
to do that because,
Yes.
like the reality is we could fall over tomorrow.
Anything can happen at any time. Yeah. The truest fact is, unfortunately, anything can happen at any time. Please go have your wishes known. Even if you can't pre-fund it, at least tell somebody what you want.
Yeah, have a
And,
Word
and
document.
take it seriously.
Mhm.
Right? Don't, I
Mhm.
have friends who have in the past and, I just want a Viking funeral. And they're talking about the Hollywood idea of sending a boat out onto the ocean and shooting a flaming arrow. Number one, can't happen. That's
No.
illegal. Number two,
Super not.
that's not a Viking funeral. That is a
Yeah.
Hollywood funeral. The Vikings buried their
Buried
ships.
in big mounds.
Okay?
I've seen them.
They
I've
did.
walked among
Yeah.
them. Yes.
So I actually had a friend that would do that. Every time his wife would say, well, we got I'll just do this. And finally I sat him down and I told him, I said, hey, you really got to take this seriously. I said, because what happens if something happens to you? Your wife and your child are in disarray because
No.
nobody knows how grief is going to
Oh.
affect their life. And grief affects your life so much more than you
Mhm.
realize. I told him, I said, imagine your wife and your child are in full grief, right? They've just lost you. They feel unmoored.
Untethered.
And they come in and she sits with the director and she goes, well, my husband very specifically told me he wants this, this, and this, and this. And I said, and then that funeral director looks them right in the eye and says, I'm so sorry. That's illegal in the state of California. I can't do that. And there's probably no one in the United States who's going to allow that to happen. And I said, so now imagine that grief they have is compounded by the fact that they cannot adhere to your final wishes. And to his credit, he stopped and he thought about it and he went, oh, and then he started writing down what he actually wanted.
Because it's not just the loss, you have the pressure of like, would this person be happy with what we choose? Am I gonna pick the right thing? Are they gonna haunt me forever if I
Will
don't
they
do
be
it right?
happy? Will their living family be happy? Will their friends be happy? Will my family be happy? The amount of pressure a person feels when planning a funeral is so incredibly high. I tell people very often, it's the same as a wedding,
Yeah,
right? It's a quote unquote one-time event, but it's a high emotion, not cheap, and it's going to be imprinted on people's minds. Funerals are not for the dead, they're for the living. They are for people to get closure, they're for people to get peace after having to say goodbye to someone they love very deeply.
Yeah. You are losing your mind with grief or just completely checked out. There's something to fall back on. There is a plan. There is a document.
There's a plan and a signature. There's a signature that says, I want this. I want this. That's a big thing. So that's my biggest rant about just even if you don't know what you want fully, even if all you know is you want to be buried or you want to be cremated, just write it down. Just tell somebody.
On the STEM side, on the science side, can you give like a high level overview of the most common processes that you have to be familiar with and like what is involved? Like you talked about chemistry, you talked a little bit about anatomy and phys, obviously, like
So we take essentials of human anatomy and physiology, right? That's before you're even in the program. You have to pass that to get into the program. Once you're in the program, we're going to take chemistry for funeral service, which is going to have a high focus on formaldehyde as well as things.
I can smell it. As soon as you said it, I could just smell it.
Understanding cauterants versus humectants, what they do, because both are used depending. There's even though there is a flow you follow to embalm, no human body is the same as the other. So every embalming is different. We make a joke about it when you're in school and you're asking questions. The main answer you get in funeral service is, it depends, because there is no one answer, right? So it is a really fascinating career to study for because you can't get an absolute. Like, other than the law, right? The law is pretty much the only absolute you can have because it's so many factors determine what your embalming is going to look like, right? What happened to that person? What age is that person? What diet did they follow? What was their lifestyle like? Like there's just so much and you don't know that, right? When they
Mm,
show up on you, you have no idea. You sometimes don't even know what they passed from yet. Because if
mm.
you're waiting to hear from the medical examiner, that can take up to, I believe they have up to 6 months to give you causes of passing.
Wow.
Then we move into pathology for funeral service. So
Mm.
a focus on what disease is going to live post mortem. What do you need to do to mitigate that?
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Oh
You don't wanna,
yeah,
like, cut into a big balloon full of germs that could fly out any second. Oh my god, I
and
didn't
that's
even
what you're
think
doing.
about that.
That's your job.
Ugh.
Embalming during COVID when we didn't even know what it was, right?
Right. We're washing our groceries and you're cutting into bodies. Like, come on.
Yeah, and I wasn't yet. I was not yet in that point,
Sure,
but I will
sure.
tell you,
Right.
because I'll tell you this: when I first started in the program, like I said, it was we were doing it via Zoom. Our professors weren't even in the area. They were down at the border helping to embalm to get migrant workers back home because they deserved
Oh
to
my
be with their families. And so they went down and donated their time to just and it was like they were exhausted. They were in class telling us
It's
like
like
I think I actually
wartime at that point, like, the
and then
bodies that were
well,
coming in.
wartime, the modern reason we have embalming, right? We
Mhm,
don't
mhm,
embalm the way the ancient Egyptians did.
mm-mm.
The modern form of embalming was created during the American Civil War because it was to bring troops back to their loved ones
In the summer heat in a wood casket on a horse
from
and
the
wagon.
south with humidity, right?
Good
They weren't in
god.
Arizona. They were in the
Mhm,
southeast. So like
mhm.
it's humid and who knows how long it would take until you could get them to go home,
Yeah, my bread didn't
right?
even last, like, 3 days in
Yeah.
Maryland, so I I don't even think
Yeah.
about a
And it
body.
didn't have pathogens working as hard as it could to return you to the earth.
Mm.
So anyway, so pathology for funeral service. We then also take microbiology for funeral services, and then we move into embalming one and embalming two. That is our science classes, right? We and then at the same time as we're doing that, we're also taking accounting.
The business side and the customer service. I was just thinking that. I was like, "You really were, like, kind of meant to do this because of all of your
Everything.
history doing interactions with the public and customer service. You guys have to not just know the science, you have to take care of people at their worst,
Yeah.
moment and their
And get them to
grief.
sign legal paperwork during that
And
time
read the legal paperwork.
and not feel like, yeah, and not obviously we have to adhere to the law, but you also like the easiest way to put it is I don't want to feel icky at the end of my day. I don't want to leave an interaction with somebody and go, sure got their money today. No, that's horrible. When somebody meets with me after we've spent whatever time we need together, I want them to leave feeling confident that I'm going to take care of what they need, feeling secure that their loved one is being treated with respect and love and tenderness. And third, like support. I want them to know like we are available 24/7. In an industry, we are 24/7 available because death doesn't work 9 to 5. We also take psychology of death and dying because we have to understand grief structure and how. And we also take a full counseling class where all we do is practice talking to people in heightened situations. This is not a job for everybody. This is a job that
No.
we can teach you some stuff, but there's certain parts of our job that can't be taught. So empathy. If you have to have a basic understanding of empathy because you have to be able to look at somebody and tell them like even if you've never experienced what they're experienced, you have to be able to look at them and figure out where they're at and why they're acting the way they're acting, right? Some people are going to come at you horrendously and, oh, it doesn't feel good. But you just have to be willing to take that step back and go, their entire life just changed today.
I'm sure people are in the middle
Yes.
of talking to you and surprise themselves with how suddenly emotional they get.
Oh, the amount of people that apologize. I have to tell my families all the time because, oh, I'm so sorry. They'll ask me, oh, can you do this? I'm so sorry. I'm like, why are you sorry? Like, my job is to be here for you today. So diversity is a massive point, especially here in the Bay Area. Um, I grew up a white person who, with a basic framework of Christianity as how I started, but mainly atheist my whole, growing up or agnostic, if you will. But of course, the funerals I did go to looked exactly like what we're talking about, right? There's a what we would call a half couch casket, which is that's where the top's open and the bottom's closed
Mhm.
with the flowers on top. Everybody gets in a line. It's very somber. The music is very
So
classical and quiet.
surreal, so
And you
bizarre.
just walk and you walk up and hopefully that person in there looks like the person you remember. I will tell you my first experience with that was not that.
Same.
And
Mhm.
I walked in, I lost a young friend. She was a goth
Mm.
girl, right? And when I walked up to see her in her casket, she had her makeup as natural as possible. She didn't look anything like the person we know. Now, totally understandable why,
Sure,
right? Like
sure.
you're a
But
parent,
that's
you've
still
just lost your
jarring.
child. It's very jarring. It's
Yeah.
very, very jarring. And especially when you're, I think I was 15 at the time. I was young and it really stuck with me. It really upset me. It actually made me very anti-embalming for a very long
Mm.
time because I didn't understand what was happening, right? I didn't
Mhm.
because I was too young to understand like, oh no, this isn't the embalming. This is the direction they were given and they followed it. And obviously memory's fuzzy, but if I think back now, I can really sit and go, from an embalmer perspective, she looked beautiful. Like she did look
Mm.
beautiful. She just didn't look like my friend that I knew.
Friend. Sure.
And and of course in the hierarchy of it, mom and dad are going to matter the most in that
Sure.
situation.
Absolutely.
So understanding the diversity of religion is really important, right? So we take one of the classes we took is funeral directing one. Funeral directing one is that very basic intro to kind of like your major religions, right? That tells you kind of who buries, who cremates, why, and that why is like I said, this is when you're learning anything culturally out of a book, there's only so much you can take from that, right? That's, the way you truly learn it is from the people who live it every day.
Right.
In the Bay Area, a major majority of my business is for the Hindu community. And I didn't grow up understanding that, right? I had no idea. And, like I said, funeral directing one gave me a basic idea of what I was
Right.
supposed to do.
But it can be different
But
based on region that you're from, not even, like, country, but
exactly.
region, like, it could be
Region.
different from one town to
Hinduism.
town.
Yep.
Mm,
Hinduism is the oldest religion and it is the most diverse religion.
mm,
Because also, from my understanding, anyone listening can write in and tell me if
mhm,
I'm completely wrong.
absolutely.
But what I was taught is that the term Hindu means people of the Indus Valley, Indus region, right?
Mm,
It doesn't even mean a religion. You can be a Hindu who's not a practicing Hindu. It could just be a descriptor because of where you're from.
hmm,
So, like, there's so much flexibility even in the language we use on that, right? So, therefore, you can't go in assuming you know anything. I work in a funeral home that is predominantly white. So, therefore, something that we face consistently is rightfully people coming in going, hey, I Googled that I needed to do a Hindu service and you guys came up and they walk in and they look at us and they look real confused.
yeah,
Rightfully so. And they look really
yeah.
nervous because it's terrifying to have to step out of your community and ask for help from somebody who may not understand it, who may who you might be afraid is going to judge you on it, right?
So that's, like, one of the biggest, gut punches in the grief process is leaving your loved one's body, like, just thinking of them sitting in a cooler or under the sheet like you see on TV, like, you don't even all you have, for the most part, is what you see on TV, and you go home at night without your person, and you're like, "Oh my gosh." Like, I think for me, what I remember and the various folks that I've lost, the hardest part, like, I have to actively not think about it, is, like, that's not
Yes.
them anymore, and these people are gonna take care of what's
Mhm.
left. Like, oh,
Oh yeah.
brutal.
Well, and like and to that point, you get a lot of people who when they come to meet with you, they'll go, "Can I see them?" And part of it's because they want to make sure they're okay. They want to make
Yeah.
sure they're all right. And so we go, "Yeah, okay." We get it
Yeah.
ready. Like that's what we go
Mhm.
do and we make sure they look peaceful and
Mhm.
there's a few things we can do very early on to just make them look like they're
Mhm.
sleeping. And this isn't even with embalming even. This is
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
in, kind of just getting somebody's hands over their, chest or stomach,
Resting, yeah.
versus, making sure the mouth is closed because most
Mhm.
people, right? We lose
Mhm,
control
you're
of our
relaxed.
muscles. So we
Mhm.
die, our
Mhm.
mouth opens, our eyes might be open, we
Mhm.
see a slump. Most dead bodies aren't as scary as movies tell you they are, right? Like most people think they're going to be, most really do just look like they were asleep and that they maybe are yawning. They kind of look like they're doing a big yawn.
Mm-hmm.
And so our job is to make them look like they're peacefully asleep, right? And that's it. And that's a big thing we hear. Oh my God, they just look like they're sleeping. Good. Because
Yeah.
I want you to feel confident when you leave this building that your loved one is being cared for. That is a human being. And I will say, my team works with respect. We care. We're not tossing them in. No, they are set lovingly. They are carried by more than one person, right? To make sure we're delicately setting down. It's very normal. It's very normal in this business to do things like you bump into, you'll bump in, you're moving
Yeah.
stuff and you'll go, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, ma'am. You
Oh,
talk to them
yeah.
because they're still people, right?
Yeah.
They may not have, depending on your belief, they may not have a soul in them. They may still have it in there. But no matter what, they're somebody's loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what matters to us, right? That's still somebody who is in our care. So, back to what we were saying about the diversity in our area, a big thing I had to learn was how do I run Hindu services and how do I run them in a way that makes a family feel confident I can do it?
Yeah.
Well, you ask a lot of questions and you ask them of the right people. So we're really lucky because we've done a lot of research. So we have a list of pundits or priests that we work with quite frequently that have done a lot of services for us. And they take the time to teach us because we come to them and we say, hey, we want to make sure we're doing everything respectfully. And that's where you start to learn. Another thing, about that type of those types of services is usually not embalming. We're not embalming. This is usually an unembalmed body. Please know, everybody listening, unless specified by a medical professional or, like a medical board, dead bodies are fine to touch. They're not going to hurt you, right? Unless somebody has told you that there is a postmortem, issue or like a communicable disease, right? Yeah, they're fine. You can touch them, you can kiss them, you can hold them. You know what I mean? Like and it's very normal. And there are a lot of cultures that's what they do, right? Which is another part of my job. Standing in that doorway and inviting people in and telling them what you're about to see is normal. Do not judge. Do not enter with any judgment in your heart. And so,
Mm.
I had to learn how to do a ritual washing and dressing, right?
Mm.
So that's something that I do a lot, right? And that is taking a person who's not embalmed, but I have disinfected, right? I have cleaned and washed them ahead of time. They're now laying peacefully on a table, and now we're going to bring in their family, and they're going to pray. They're going to show respect. We're going to dress. We're going to casket. We're going to do all that together. We're going to spend this hour together that hopefully, if everything goes right and I do my job correctly, hopefully really bonds us during that hour so that for the next, we schedule our services in 4-hour blocks. So that means for the next 3 hours, we've now built this trust, hopefully, in that first hour. And you
That sounds
understand how
so
much I care.
lovely. That sounds like
It's my favorite part of my
so
job.
much better than the
Mhm.
cold, like you said, Civil War byproduct of like you gotta preserve this person. Very hands off, very like you said, coming in and
Yeah.
finding your person doesn't look like your person. It's like a wedding in that you're like, oh, that's Uncle so and so. I haven't seen them in 30 years. And like it's just this weird the process you're describing just sounds really lovely.
Yeah. And well, thank you. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. And I will say this too, but those moments do happen with embalming.
Mm,
As I mentioned earlier, nothing's the same.
mm,
No two bodies are the same. And like some bodies come in and they peacefully pass in their sleep. That's very
mhm,
straightforward for the most part. Sometimes they've come to the medical examiner. Sometimes they've come from a really tragic end. And
mm,
our
mm.
job is to take that and make that into something that their loved ones are gonna say, that's my loved one. Knock on wood, the number one comment I hear, whether it's somebody I've taken care of or my other embalmer, is I can't believe how good they look. They haven't looked this good in months. That's the whole point.
And this is our not so final resting place on this 2-part episode and my conversation with Michelle Tokarski. I don't know about you, but I'm really glad people like her are doing this sacred work. In the next episode, we'll learn a lot more about the scientific and technical aspects of the work done by Michelle and morticians everywhere. She'll walk us through embalming and cremation, organ harvesting, face and body reconstruction, makeup for dead people, and so much more. Be prepared because it's detailed, sometimes intense, but absolutely fascinating. Of course, we can't end a science nonfiction double feature podcast show without some history and haunting stories too. So join us for part 2, coming later this week, as we pull back the veil on what it's really like caring for the dead. And speaking of haunting, I'm here to rattle your chains about following us on social media again. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Blue Collar White Coat Pod, all one word, on Blue Sky at BCWC Podcast, all one word, and on Substack under Amy Writes Science. Have a question? Want to see a job that we haven't talked about yet? Email us at bluecollarwhitecoatpod@gmail.com. As always, thank you for listening to Blue Collar White Coat, and until next time, keep your safety glasses on, because embalming is messy work, and your mind open.